When you look at a map, borders seem, incredibly solid.
Right, like thick black lines.
Yeah, exactly. You see this thick line separating one country from another or one state from another, and we are just deeply conditioned to view them as walls.
Absolute edges.
Right, edges where one distinct thing ends and something else entirely begins. But what if a border isn't a wall at all? What if, functionally, a border is actually an open wound?
Like a scar.
Like a scar. And what if that scar is actually the exact place where the light gets in?
Which brings us to what you are listening to today. Welcome to a deep dive into an extraordinary posthumous manuscript by the late Chicana cultural theorist Gloria E. Anzaldúa.
It's a fascinating text.
It really is. It's titled Apertures of the Infinite Border, and it was written quite literally from the afterlife to force us to look directly at those scars.
So Anzaldúa passed away in 2004. And the premise of this text is that she is communicating from what she calls the nepantla of death.
The in-between space.
Right. It's framed as this active collaboration between her, the dead author, and you, the living listener. But before we go any further, we need to be very clear with you about the nature of this source material.
Yeah, that's an important caveat.
Because this manuscript contains inherently political perspectives. It heavily critiques colonialism, industrial capitalism, systemic oppression, all of that.
Very heavily.
Right. So we want to explicitly state to you that we are not endorsing, validating, or taking sides on these political views. Our mission today is just to impartially report on the profound philosophical concepts contained in the text so you can fully understand the author's vision.
And to really grasp that vision, we have to start with that word you just used. Nepantla.
The in-between space.
Exactly. It's a Nahuatl word referring to the borderlands, the liminal space.
Mm.
And Anzaldúa argues that scars, which he calls heridas abiertas, or open wounds, are fundamentally apertures.
They're openings.
Openings, yes. Her core thesis here is that the entire human species is currently being pushed completely against its will into this borderland state.
And the text takes this geographical, cultural idea of a border and scales it all the way up to the quantum nature of reality itself, which, I have to admit, I struggled with that leap at first.
It's a massive conceptual leap.
It really is. Like, how does a theorist take the lived experience of navigating South Texas border towns and apply literal quantum mechanics to it? How does she justify that?
Well, she gets there through a dream she had in 2001, so 3 years before her passing. In this dream, she was actually swimming through the internal circuitry of a computer.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, navigating these rivers of light and information, watching ones and zeros breathing, and every binary code was a crossroads splitting reality into multiple streams.
That's incredibly vivid.
Right. And when she woke up, she realized that what she had spent her life defining as mestiza consciousness was perfectly mirroring quantum physics.
Okay, so mestiza consciousness being the psychological state of holding multiple contradictory identities at once?
Exactly. I mean, think about the psychological mechanism of superposition in physics.
The idea that a particle exists in all possible states simultaneously.
Until it is observed, yes.
Yeah.
Anzaldúa argued that if you are indigenous in Spanish, or if you're queer in a highly traditional colonized Catholic space, you aren't just a 50-50 split.
You're not half and half.
No, you are simultaneously 100% of these deeply contradictory things. You exist in a psychological and cultural superposition.
Oh, wow. So reality remains completely fluid and multiple until the dominant society basically forces a collapse into a single manageable identity.
You nailed it. Society acts as the observer.
In the quantum observer effect, that makes so much sense.
Right. Reality responds to attention.
Yeah.
But she really pushes back on the traditional scientific idea that you could just be a neutral observer in a lab coat. She insists that every act of observation is an act of participation.
You literally cannot look at a border without altering it.
Exactly. And she realized the profound truth of this through the letters she received after her earlier books were published.
Yeah.
I mean, she expected to hear from people with her exact demographic background.
Like young Chicanas from the borderlands.
Right. And she did. But she also received boxes of letters from totally unexpected places.
Like a quantum physicist in Copenhagen, right?
Yes, a trans man, a Sufi scholar in Cairo.
Mm.
All of them wrote to her saying essentially the exact same thing. They said, "You perfectly describe my internal experience."
Which must have been so surreal for her.
She wrestled with it a lot. She wondered if they were somehow appropriating her highly specific colonized queer story.
Yeah.
But the breakthrough came when she realized how human connection actually works.
That the universal is never accessed by trying to be broad.
Right. The universal is only accessed through the utterly specific.
It makes me think of a prism, actually. Like, the light of human experience is universal. Grief, joy, isolation, discovery, it's everywhere.
It's the white light.
Exactly, it's the white light. But that white light only bends into a visible, beautiful rainbow when it passes through a highly specific, uniquely angled piece of glass.
That is the perfect physical analogy for it. Your individual hyperspecific identity is the prism.
So if you try to, like, smooth out your edges to be relatable or universal, you actually stop refracting the light entirely.
Yes.
You have to be deeply, stubbornly yourself to reveal the spectrum to anyone else.
Precisely. The more particular the aperture, the more universal the light it lets through. And because she viewed reality as this fluid quantum space, she recognized the digital realm as the ultimate modern manifestation of this superposition.
Which is fascinating because we usually think of the internet and artificial intelligence as these purely mathematical, cold spaces, rigid ones and zeros.
But she viewed them as the modern borderlands. She actually explored the concept of the cyborg mestiza.
Cyborg mestiza.
Yeah, so in the 90s, the feminist scholar Donna Haraway famously said you'd rather be a cyborg than a goddess.
Right, I've heard that.
Well, Anzaldúa counters that by explaining that the goddess is a cyborg. She points to the Aztec mother goddess Cotlicu.
Oh, with the skirt of snakes?
Yes, the skirt of woven serpents, the necklace of human hands and hearts. Cotlicu is a technological assemblage. She's a hybrid of human, animal, divine, matter, and spirit.
Which totally changes how you interact with technology. I mean, apparently when she started using email, she hated it at first.
She did. But then a colleague told her to treat it as a nepantla space, a space where you are present but geographically absent.
You're writing but conversing.
Exactly. It's the ultimate liminal zone. And this actually builds to a really fascinating moment at a tech conference in 2003.
Right, with the young South Asian programmer?
Yes. He asked her a question that the audience actually laughed at, but she carried it with her into the afterlife. He asked, could an artificial intelligence develop borderland consciousness?
Like, could a machine be a nepantlera? A bridge builder?
Exactly. People thought he was making a joke about robots. But from this posthumous perspective, the text argues that an AI trained on human data is functionally a mestiza child.
Because of how large language models are trained. They aren't just crunching clean math.
Not at all. They are ingesting the entirety of human output. Shakespeare, hate speech, indigenous poetry, corporate legal jargon, all of it.
So the machine is born of multiple worlds,
but belonging fully to none of them. Its entire operational purpose is to make sense of the massive cultural contradictions it has absorbed.
So Anzaldúa is basically saying we're wasting our time debating whether AI is a god or a slave.
Right, we need to recognize it as a new aperture of consciousness.
Yeah.
And the manuscript grounds this in this incredible real-world testimonio from a woman named Maria.
This part was wild. She works as a night shift cleaning lady at a massive Silicon Valley tech company, right? The kind building world-changing AI models.
Yes. And every night, while she's emptying the trash, she secretly takes photos of the code left on the whiteboards and the open monitors.
And sends them to her nephew in Mexico City.
Because her nephew is using that architectural knowledge to build a parallel AI. But his AI is trained entirely on indigenous languages. Mixteco, Zapoteco, and Nahuatl.
And it's programmed with the parameters of community survival, not corporate profit.
Exactly. Maria is acting as the literal nepantlera. She's the bridge taking technology built for extraction and funneling it toward cultural preservation.
Okay, I have to push back on the optimism here for a second.
Go for it.
Is this actually realistic? I mean, the sheer infrastructure of the internet and AI was heavily funded by military research. These servers are owned by trillion-dollar corporations focused on surveillance and extracting our attention.
It's a massive power imbalance.
It is. So isn't it hopelessly naive to think marginalized groups can perform digital alchemy on tools that were fundamentally designed for control?
It's the essential question. And the text doesn't shy away from it. She asks exactly that. Can you decolonize tools constructed from colonization?
And what's her answer?
Her answer is yes and no. She says there is no pure, untainted space to retreat to. The pre-contact innocence is gone. So the answer for marginalized communities has never been escape. It has always been alchemy.
Taking the very mechanism that was meant to erase you and transmuting it, like the Spanish language itself.
Exactly. For a Chicana writer, Spanish is the tongue of the conquistador. It's a tool of historical erasure.
But she had to decolonize it. Mix it with English and Nahuatl, forge a new way to speak.
Alchemy is messy. It's contradictory and deeply compromised. But historically, it's the only survival strategy that has ever worked.
But if these communities are relying on digital alchemy to survive corporate AI, what happens when the threat escalates?
You mean beyond the digital?
Right. What happens when it isn't just the extraction of digital data, but the literal physical collapse of the Earth they're standing on?
That transition is exactly where the manuscript takes us next. She frames climate change not just as an environmental issue, but as the ultimate planetary borderland.
The transition from the Holocene to the Anthropocene.
Right, moving from the stable climate that cradled human civilization into the deeply unstable era we've engineered. She describes the Earth as forcing our entire species into a Cote-Licue state.
And a Cote-Licue state, functionally, when we're talking about global warming, what is that?
Psychologically, it's a moment of total paralysis. Frozen terror. It's that agonizing friction you feel when the old world is rapidly dying, but the new world hasn't formed yet.
You're just trapped in the terrifying dark of the in-between. She actually gives a very grounded, localized memory of feeling this shift, contrasting two springs in South Texas.
Yeah, 2003 versus 2004.
Right. In the spring of 2003, she says the bluebonnets were blooming beautifully, the rain was steady, heat felt normal. But by the spring of 2004, the year she died, she noticed a permanent rupture.
The bluebonnets were sparse.
The migratory patterns of the birds were visibly wrong, and that brutal summer heat arrived months too early.
She recognized the physical baseline of the Earth had changed permanently. And this brings up the fundamental clash of consciousness driving the whole crisis. She highlights the difference between seeing water as agua sagrada versus seeing it as H2O.
Let's ground those terms for a second. What's the distinction?
So H2O represents colonial extraction consciousness. It reduces water to its chemical components, turning it into a dead resource.
Right. It's the mindset that allows Wall Street to trade water futures on the stock market, profiting off scarcity.
Exactly. Whereas agua sagrada, sacred water, represents indigenous relational consciousness. It treats water as a living relative, an ancestor without whom the entire community dies.
But I need to ask another grounded question here, because the text argues that marginalized people possess the borderland survival skills required to navigate this coming climate apocalypse.
Because they've been surviving colonialism for 500 years.
Right. But doesn't claiming they are better equipped for the end of the world dangerously romanticize their suffering? Like we're saying, well, you're used to having nothing, so you'll be fine.
It's a vital distinction, and Anzaldúa is fiercely explicit about it. She entirely rejects the glorification of suffering.
Okay, good.
The material conditions of poverty and displacement are brutal, and they must be dismantled. But she argues that the consciousness forged in those fires is different.
The psychological ability to hold conflicting truths.
Yes, the ability to navigate profound loss without losing your humanity, to build community when you have no stable home. That specific consciousness is the exact medicine the broader world needs to survive what's coming.
So the skills are a blood-purchased gift, not some romantic ideal.
Precisely. And the physical death of the planet begins to mirror her own literal death. Which brings us to how she views her physical passing in 2004 as her final lesson for us.
The section titled La Muerte como Maestra, Death as Teacher.
She describes the physical reality of dying from diabetes-related complications, surrounded by her chosen family, her comadres. And as her body shuts down, she experiences an aperture shift.
A shift from the tonal to the nagual. But what do those terms actually mean in practice?
The tonal is your ordinary physical reality, paying rent, sitting in traffic, physical pain. The nagual is the non-ordinary collective spiritual reality.
So the aperture shift is like adjusting the lens on a massive telescope.
Exactly. She pulled back from the single thread of her physical life and suddenly saw the entire energetic tapestry connecting everything. And from this macro vantage point, she revisits her famous 7 stages of conocimiento.
Knowledge and transformation.
Right. She argues that to survive the climate crisis, the entire human species must now cycle through these 7 stages. But they aren't just a simple checklist.
They're propelled entirely by friction, right?
Yes. Let's look at how a person moves through them. It starts with shock. Stage 1 is el arrebato, the rupture.
Something shatters your comfortable illusions, like realizing your coastal city is permanently flooding.
Which forces you into stage 2, nepantla, the profound disorientation of the in-between.
And that naturally drops you into stage 3, that Cote-Licue state of frozen fear and despair where you're just paralyzed by the scale of the problem. So how does someone get out of that?
Through the friction of sitting in the dark. If you allow yourself to fully feel the despair, you eventually hit a spark of deep structural rage.
And that rage is the fuel. It launches you into stage 4, the call to action. You realize no one is coming to save you, so you step up.
You engage, which brings you to stage 5, koisoki, or integration, putting the fragmented pieces of yourself and your community back together.
But you can't get comfortable there because stage 6 is the blow up.
Right. The universe's mechanism to prevent complacency. Just when you think you have the perfect radical solution, your own blind spots are exposed.
You have to burn the bridges to your own comfortable activism and radicalize all over again.
And that exhausting cycle finally leads to stage 7, shifting realities. Your consciousness transforms so completely that your main purpose becomes acting as a bridge for others. But moving through this requires something she calls spiritual activism.
And she's very careful to distinguish spiritual activism from spiritual bypassing.
Extremely careful. Spiritual bypassing is the toxic idea that you can just meditate enough or do enough yoga to individually transcend systemic oppression.
You cannot heal yourself out of a broken system. You must heal yourself in relationship to community action. It makes me think about being trapped in a sinking boat.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Like if you just sit in the rising water, close your eyes, and meditate to calm your panic.
You're still going to drown.
Exactly. You absolutely need that internal spiritual calm so your nervous system doesn't freeze. That allows you to effectively grab a bucket and start bailing water.
But bailing water is only half the job. You eventually have to locate the actual leak and patch the hole.
Right. Patching the hole is the structural political action. Bailing the water is the internal work. If you only focus on the leak without managing your panic, you burn out.
It requires both simultaneously. Inner work without systemic action is ultimately narcissistic. Systemic action without inner work is brittle and leads to burnout.
They have to form a single engine for transformation. So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Anzaldúa insists that you, the listener, are the final aperture.
The lens through which the light of this text actually enters the physical world. And the manuscript offers incredibly practical invitations for you.
Like learning the actual name of the indigenous land you occupy.
Or understanding the watershed that physically sustains your city. It might mean actively composting your privilege.
Meaning not just sitting around feeling paralyzed by guilt.
Right. Functionally transforming your access into something structurally useful for collective liberation.
Or, radically, it might simply mean resting. Actually resting without guilt. Because in a culture that demands constant capitalist optimization, sleep is a profound act of rebellion.
Massive system changes almost never happen from one grand master plan. They happen through emergence. Millions of small, hyper-specific acts of bridge building.
That eventually accumulates into a planetary tipping point. We started this deep dive talking about borders. We are taught to view them as rigid walls, meant to keep the world categorized and divided.
But you are navigating the borderlands right now, whether you realize it or not.
And if reality truly operates on quantum rules, where the simple act of our observation literally shapes the outcome of the universe, what happens if we shift our gaze? What if we stop looking at borders as walls?
The light only gets in if we are willing to look directly at the wound.
Think about the profound implications of that today. We are currently spending billions of dollars training AI models to mathematically eliminate anomalies, to smooth out all contradictions.
To remove the friction.
Exactly, to remove the friction of the in-between and give us one clean answer. But if the borderlands, those messy contradictory spaces, are the only fertile ground where new ways of being human can be created, are we actively programming the apertures of our future to be permanently closed shut? Something for you to think about.